This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
He got me invested in some kind of fruit company. And so then I got a call from him saying, we don't have to worry about money no more. And I said, that's good. One less thing.
Live from the basement of the YouTube headquarters, it's the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and what's the best way to take money from your portfolio during your retirement years? We're talking decumulation with 3 top minds from the retirement planning community. From how to frame your retirement spending to setting up your assets for the most success and all the way to safe withdrawal rates, we're covering as much as we can cram in today. That's right, no trivia challenge, no game show, just a guide to help you plan out how to rethink that retirement year's portfolio and spending plan. And now, a guy whose spending plan is all focused on exploring the world, it's Joe Saul-Sehy.
Hey there, Stackers, and happy Friday to you. I'm super excited that you're here with us. Doug, you got that right. I, as you're listening to this, am just ending what I'm sure is going to suck as we record this. I'll just be coming home from Greece, which I don't know how I'm going to even do that. But I'm not there yet as we record it because we've got this important discussion about retirement. So let's meet our contributors. Let's start with the closest thing to a regular that we have on this panel. Dana Anspach here from Sensible Money. How are you, Dana?
I'm doing great, Joe, and this is one of my favorite topics. As you know, I love all things that have to do with decumulation, that word that oftentimes they tell us we're not supposed to use because it sounds so scary.
Oh, but you know what's funny, Dana? If you do it wrong, and we'll get into this a little bit, it can be scary.
Absolutely, right? You work hard to save this nest egg, and then one day you're supposed to draw it out. And I have very sophisticated people I've worked with that honestly, they get terrified about taking that first withdrawal. So it is scary. No matter how well you do your planning, I think fundamentally it's scary.
I think in this case, a little bit of fear is good because you really need to plan how to change your portfolio, which we'll dive into today. By the way, the $1 million question, Dana, for people that are not hanging out with us on YouTube, you're always walking and talking. You're not walking today. What's going on?
I'm not. I needed a break. I am planning for a big hiking trip in the Swiss Alps, and I've had enough walking for a while.
She's like, and cut. I'm not going to do it. Generally, people that are new to the Stacking Benjamin Show, Dana's on like a walking treadmill, like walking desk or walking.
And I'm actually sitting on that treadmill on a stool right now. That tells you my feet have had enough. I need a break.
Perfect. Well, and these next 2 gentlemen, let's start with a guy who I've known for a few years. We met at a campfire outside of San Diego. They call him Big Earn. He's Karsten Jeske from Early Retirement Now. Karsten Jeske's here. How are you, man?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. I'm getting ready to travel soon, too.
So we're all traveling. So we got the Alps, we got Greece. Where are you going?
We're doing 3 big trips. We're going to do a cruise to Alaska, also spend a few days in the Olympic Peninsula, then fly to Asia for 4 weeks and come back to home again for a few days. And then we take another trip. We fly to New York City and then take a cruise ship from New York to Nova Scotia, Greenland, and Iceland, and then fly back from Reykjavik and check out the Blue Lagoon there too. And So it's going to be pretty packed summer.
What are you doing, man? I mean, you are never home.
Yeah, I mean, and we were thinking about basically renting out the place, but there's HOA rules against that, so I can't do that. Or at least I won't tell it publicly. So if I ever do it, I have to keep it a secret.
That is the perfect money nerd thing, though. I was thinking about Airbnb. Yes, but I can't. Like, our first thing is that I'm going to enjoy my vacation. The first thing is how can I go on vacation and profit from it at the same time? That's and now because it's your first time here, all of our Uber nerds in the financial independence retire early space know what you do. But tell everybody else in Stackerland, Karsten, what you do as Big Earn.
Right. So I started blogging in 2016, and I blog a lot about safe withdrawal rates, but it's not the only thing. So it's not like I'm a one-trick pony. I do some other stuff too. I just write about anything in personal finance. I write sometimes some economics commentary too. So option trading is probably maybe my second favorite topic to talk about, but that's a whole different story. But I mean, my background is in finance, and I retired from that. But of course, you can never let go of that hobby. So you're still involved. I still look at the market every day. It's almost like reading People magazine, right? So you keep up with your gossip here and there. And for me, it's like a People magazine, but with stocks and inflation reports and GDP numbers. And so that's
very sexy stuff.
That's my hobby.
Very sexy stuff for money nerds. You know, Karsten, actually, the only reason I had you here was to chide you for writing at Early Retirement Now about calling me a small cap value fanboy.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to have you here to chide you for that. Not a fanboy of anything. I'm like, what the hell, man?
I thought, I don't know how I put you into this camp. Maybe you had some comment on some Facebook thread somewhere where I misread something you said there. So I apologize for that.
I said you should have some small cap value. And all of a sudden, it's like I have Duran Duran posters, but they're small cap value decorating mom's basement here. Yeah. And another guy who got called by you a small cap value fanboy, I think he's the host of Risk Parity Radio. He and I have been in the same room like 57 times, but we've never ever actually shaken hands. So it's about time. Frank Vasquez is here. How are you, Uncle Frank?
I am doing well. I'm doing well.
Well, tell everybody about Risk Parity Radio, because you take this topic we're talking about today and you deep dive.
Yes. Well, it's my retirement hobby. I started it in 2020. All we talk about are portfolio strategies, particularly for do-it-yourself investors who are in their decumulation phase. I end up having lots of conversations with listeners. It's a solo podcast. It's just me and Mary. It's not commercial, but we do support a charity that I also sit on the board of, which it takes up a lot of my time, which is called the Father McKenna Center. And we are having a matching promotion for the Father McKenna Center because one of my listeners decided to put up $15,000 to get other listeners to match. And so we are,
I love that.
We're pumping that now, and the money's rolling in. So it's a great charity. It supports hungry and homeless people in Washington, D.C., and has about 1,000 volunteers every year with that are high school students and college students mostly. So
that's fabulous, Frank.
Yeah,
so that's fantastic. Those
two things are integrated with
and by the way, and Risk Parity Radio, I think, is the only podcast with more sound effects than the Stacking Benjamin Show.
Oh, like yeah. Well, I learned from you. I learned from the best.
Well, stop. Keep going. Stop.
Yeah. And my listeners now send in their emails designed to get one, a particular one.
Of course.
Yes, one of the most favored ones is Homer Simpson saying, "You have a gambling problem." Which is what I play whenever somebody starts talking about leverage. I'm like,
whenever you hear Karsten talking about options, that's when you play it right then. Yeah.
Well, he has a gambling problem too.
My favorite one is I award you 0 points and may God have mercy on you. I might say that a few times today.
And Dana, I accidentally assumed everybody knows what you do, but I skipped over that. But you work specifically with people that are either entering this phase or they're in this decumulation phase.
Yes. So my company, Sensible Money, works almost exclusively with people transitioning into retirement. We wish people would start working with us 5 to 10 years out from their retirement date, but oftentimes it's, the year before, 3 years
4 days
out.
before.
Yeah. And so we work with the people who want to delegate or people who have been do-it-yourselfers. And then the complexity of retirement, it does get more complex at that point. And so they decide maybe it's time for them to delegate. I'm a big fan though, whether you do it yourself or want someone to help you do it or delegate, it's all, if you're following good principles, at the root of it, good advice is good advice.
Well, I'm thinking with the three of you, we're going to get some great advice today for our stackers. Whether you're 35 and you're just beginning to think about this, it's great to know ahead of time where you're headed, or you're there now. We're going to have a great discussion. So can't wait to dive in with Dana, Karsten, and Frank. We're going to kick this off in just a second, but we've got a couple sponsors that make sure we can keep on keeping on, and you don't have to pay a dime for these wonderful people that we bring to you today. So we're going to hear from them, and then let's talk decumulation phase. We should play some Dana, some dun 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 music based on the fact you said that scares people.
Yeah. Do we need like Halloween scary music?
Yeah, come on, Steve, give us that music. You may not know that when we started Stacking Benjamins, it was a blog. And even then, just the startup cost, I remember thinking, is this the right thing? And what if I write things and nobody comes, right? Well, luckily, that didn't end up happening. But starting something new isn't just hard. It's terrifying. There's so much work. You're not sure whether it's going to work out. You're not sure if anybody's going to read it. And then we change it to a podcast. Is anybody actually going to listen, right? What if nobody wants all the stuff that we have? Well, had I used Shopify, it would have been even easier, because with their expertise, their helpful tools, and their easy to use platform, that's something that would have made Stacking Benjamins more effective much, much more quickly. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Names you've heard of like Heinz and Mattel, Shopify, Gymshark, Aviator Nation, Allbirds, also all Shopify. Get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand style. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. And did I mention that iconic purple Shop Pay button? It's used by millions of businesses around the world. It's why Shopify has the best converting checkout on the planet. It also helps boost conversions, meaning less carts going abandoned and more sales for you. So you're stacking Benjamins much more quickly. Time to turn those what ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/SB. Go to shopify.com/SB. That's shopify.com/SB. Dell PCs with Intel Inside are built for the moments you plan and the ones you don't. They're for those all-night study sessions, the moment you're working from a cafe and realize every outlet's taken, the times you're deep in your flow and can't be interrupted by an auto update. That's why Dell builds tech that adapts to you. Built with long-lasting batteries so you're not scrambling for an outlet, and built-in intelligence that makes updates around your schedule, not in the middle of it. Find technology built for the way you work at Dell.com/Dell PCs. Built for you. Well, I think to really kick this off, Dana, let's start with you, because you have to kind of define this with regular people when they walk into your office. You know, maybe they've been saving for a long time and they're like, okay, I just do more of the same. When somebody first walks into your office and they're on the cusp of retirement, though, what's the first thing you want them to understand about changing their portfolio so they can start spending down their money?
Yeah, I think one of the first things to know is that what got you here may not be the best portfolio to get you there. Portfolios are constructed with goals and objectives in mind, and a portfolio for accumulation is built around a certain set of risk and return metrics, and a portfolio built for sustainable cash flow will actually have a different set of metrics. So there's an analogy I use sometimes around sports cars, or actually more than sports cars. I am still in a Ferrari portfolio. I am currently 100% equity. I'm more than 10 years from retirement. I'm comfortable with equity risk. I want to maximize returns for a given level of risk, and I'm very comfortable with risk. But as I get closer to retirement, my portfolio will change. And what should it look like? So, using a car analogy, you could go with an economy car, right? You could say, well, that's maximum fuel efficiency. Maybe that's more conservative, right? I'm going to use the least amount of fuel along the way, and I want to see if I can maximize what I leave to heirs one day. But that portfolio may not be the right one to get you through stormy weather. And so the one I like for retirement is more like the SUV. And it may not be the most fuel efficient, it may not be the fastest, but you don't know what kind of weather you're going to encounter. You could have a big storm, you could have mud, you could have snow, you could have rain. And so you need a portfolio that can get you through all kinds of terrain. And thinking that way is different. And I find that some people struggle with making that shift. They still want to go find the latest stock or the latest way to boost their returns. And that may not be the right lens to view retirement through.
I love that analogy because we also don't know where the journey's going to head. I mean, we don't know what terrain is coming ahead, and we're going to dive into that in a second. I want to ask, before we get into numbers and planning, though, about this emotion, because there's really, Frank, there's an emotional shift that happens here. You and I at conferences, we see these people that suffer from one more year syndrome, right? I mean, that's an emotional thing. How hard is it for somebody to shift from this, I've been saving my whole life mindset into a spending mindset?
It varies from person to person, but Morgan Housel has actually an interesting term for this. He calls it frugality inertia. And it's going to be featured in the book he's got coming out, which is about the art of spending money. It's coming out in October.
I love it. Frugality inertia.
Yes, that pertains particularly to people who have spent most of their life saving money and just changing their focus and changing their goals, if you will. I think is very difficult for a lot of people, particularly if they've been really good at saving money, because you feel better watching the number go up.
Sure.
But it can become like this idol that you just worship. Oh, numbers got to go up. And that's what's important. I've seen your presentations about a guy just sitting in front of the TV watching CSNBC all day long.
Oh, God,
That's not a good way to live your retirement. That you need to come to a conclusion in your head that you actually do have enough, and stop with that, and then start focusing on how can I best deploy or spend these resources over the rest of my life to usually maximize relationships is what you're really trying to do.
100%. And Karsten, I love the point that Frank made. You know, when you're looking at safe maximum withdrawal rate, you can tell somebody, I remember when I was a financial planner, I could tell somebody that I've calculated this out and you're going to be okay. But watching your number drop from month to month to month to month to month still manages to scare the hell out of people.
Yeah, and that's why everybody is afraid of retirement. So the analogy what I would use is you are in a canoe, and if you are accumulating, you are paddling downstream, right? Sometimes the stream just takes you. You don't even have to paddle. Sometimes you paddle, which would be your contributions. And retirement is like you are now paddling upstream and there's a waterfall behind you, okay? Yeah, you could stop paddling and it will take you backwards, and you kind of cross your fingers that you die before you go over the waterfall.
Exactly comforting.
And that would be the analogy, and this is why it's so scary in retirement, right? Because it's the same asset market, it's the same tools that you use. You use the same stock portfolios, the same stock mutual funds, the same bond mutual funds as during accumulation, but by shifting around from accumulation to decumulation, that's where the scary part starts. And I also believe that, a lot of people don't retire because, they've heard about the 4% rule and they kind of sort of agree with it. I've actually had some success in telling people, look, I've run these retirement simulations and you would have survived the Great Depression or the 1960s and 70s. And if you survive that, you're going to survive the next garden variety recession too. And there were some people that retired and they said, I wasn't quite sure, but Big Earn said I'm good to go. And then they did retire. So I think in some way, the math sets you free and makes you confident to retire. Whereas trying to wing it, which is what some people do. And some people do it in our community, in the fire community, and they can afford it, right? Because they're still making money off of their blog and everything. They don't even have to withdraw much from their portfolio. And then they tell people, oh, don't worry about it, I'll do 4% and everything falls into place. Yeah, but the average typical person, right? The 99% of fire enthusiasts, they still have to take money out of their portfolio. And that's a big step. And so, as I said, so the math sets you free. And at least it helps for some people, maybe not for everybody.
I think that's important, that idea of stress testing. I'm sure you probably use that,
Right.
Dana, too,
Yeah.
saying, let's look at the worst times to retire and see what would have happened with this plan we've come up with.
Yeah, I mean, the math does set you free. I've never used that line before. I like it. I think there's some inherent biases in math that people don't understand when it's simple math, like the 4% rule. And unfortunately, as you start to use more complicated math that may get you better answers, it becomes more challenging for people to understand the math.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm going to want to cover the 4% rule, cover actually what this idea, Frank, of risk parity even is, safe withdrawal rates. But before we get to any of that, Karsten, you said surviving the 70s. Are you talking about surviving a bad market or surviving disco? Like which, what are we referring
Staying
to
alive.
here? Frank's like, what? Disco died? What are you talking about?
It's all coming back, guys. It's all coming back.
It is.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I was talking about, and again, it's the late 60s, early 70s.
Sure.
It's the Great Depression. Who knows what's ahead for us, right? Because we have very expensive equities. And just when people get complacent, right? And they say that, oh, well, now we don't have to worry about any blow up in the stock market anymore. That's when things get the most dangerous, right? So in some way, my blog is a little bit of a counter-cyclical blog, right? Where if the stock market drops a lot, then everybody wants to book me on the podcast and say, oh, is fire finished now? And that's actually when I tell people, well, now we have the least to worry about, right? Because the stock market is already down. I mean, as we're recording this, we're actually close to the all-time highs again. But normally when people want to talk to me is when the stock market is 20, 30% down. And then I tell people, yeah, I mean, now is a great time to retire. And the 4% rule is super safe because what are the odds that we tag on another Great Depression on top of the 20% drop already? So,
well, but still, Karsten, we did a history show a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about some of these long periods that we went through.
Right.
And, you know, you have these people out there that always say, buy the dip or don't worry, it'll come back.
Right.
And in some of these big time, long downturns, I mean, there was good news and bad news. The good news is it came back, but in one stretch, it came back 16 years later. Like, I can't imagine Dana going, hey, I got some good news. You hang in there for 16 years, you're going to be back to zero. That is ugly. But I want to bring in these terms that we've been throwing around. Frank, let's talk risk parity. So risk parity, often seen as this alternative to the, traditional like 60-40 portfolio, another rule of thumb portfolio, right? Why might somebody consider risk parity during their decumulation period?
Well, to go with Dana's analogy, I'm trying to build a Toyota 4Runner to take into retirement, basically. The colloquial use of risk parity now is for a portfolio that is focused really on what is called Ray Dalio's Holy Grail principle, which is a principle of diversification, looking for the most uncorrelated assets to combine. So a basic idea from those principles would be looking at our bonds in our portfolio. What kind of bonds do we want to have? And so your question is, well, what kind of bonds are less correlated to all the other things we have, which are mostly stocks? The answer is U.S. Treasury bonds. So those are the kinds of bonds we would want to have, and that would be the kind of choice we would make on that. So it puts a preeminence on the diversification of the assets themselves and combining them in that way. And so these portfolios typically have a stock allocation, a treasury bond allocation, and then some allocation to alternatives, which usually...
Well, let me
go ahead.
make a statement, Frank, and you tell me if this is right or not. So instead of a portfolio where you have more money in cash to manage risk, a lot of cash, you're managing risk by keeping money in things that have the ability to grow, but matching them with things where it's like an engine. One part goes up, one part goes down. So you're not sinking the portfolio, even though you've got more upside potential.
Yes, exactly. So I want an asset allocation that's like my four-wheel drive and one that's like the fog lights, so that when looking at a portfolio over a span of years, there's always something that's going up in it, not just sitting there in cash, but always going up. The reason cash causes a problem goes back to Bill Bengen's research in the 1990s, which was if you have too much cash in a portfolio, it tends to cause what's called a cash drag. And that number seems to be around 10%. Once you start going over that, your safe withdrawal rate generally declines. And what I try to build is portfolios that have the highest historical and projected safe withdrawal rates. That's the ultimate goal.
And I'm laughing, Frank, because back when I was a planner, people come into my office and I would be like, why do you have so much cash? And they go, because I want to be safe. And I said, well, you've got some good news. You're safely not going to achieve any goals.
Yeah, you're going to be very safe for the next 5 to 10 years, but 20 years hence, you may have a growth problem or another problem going on.
You're going to safely buy less bread for the rest of your life. Yeah.
No, but it's interesting. One of the other things you said, you might have as long as a 13-year downturn. Yeah. The difference between this kind of portfolio is specific to that if you look at, say, a 60-40 portfolio or a simple stock bond boglehead thing, that will have a drawdown, say, from 1999 to 2013 of like 13 years. If you take a portfolio, a risk parity style portfolio, the maximum drawdowns you're going to see are 3 to 4 years. And instead of having a 40% decline, you're going to be looking at more like a 20% decline. Both of those things play directly into a higher safe withdrawal rate. So that's if you're just looking at portfolios, if you know what their maximum drawdowns are in terms of length and in terms of depth, you know whether that's going to be, is that an SUV or not? That's what the SUVs look like.
I love the analogies. I like the SUV. I like the canoe. The canoe scares me with the waterfall a little bit, but like we open with,
at least you get a paddle.
Like we open with, you need to get a little more scientific here, though. And so having that waterfall behind you, if you're not scientific, I think there's kind of a safe here. All right, Karsten, let's go to you. Dana brought up the 4% rule. So you've done one of the deepest dives in safe withdrawal rates in history, I think. What do most people get wrong when they hear this 4% rule?
So the first 4% rule is not gospel. It's not written in stone anywhere. I think the 4% rule has to be customized in at least 2 dimensions, right? First is your personal preferences, right? Your parameters. If you retire today and you're in your early 30s and you don't expect any Social Security, any supplemental income, you probably have to take down the 4% rule because your horizon is much longer. You don't expect any supplemental cash flows. Again, and I'm not talking about the fire influencers, right? I'm talking about everyday early retirement enthusiasts. They might retire in their mid to late 40s, early 50s. They have Social Security around the corner. If you factor in future supplemental cash flows like Social Security, pensions, if you can factor in something like a spending reduction, right? I mean, you have the go years, the slow go years, and the no-go years, especially a lot of the high income and high net worth early retirees, right? They might retire and have a retirement budget of $150,000 or $200,000. Well, they're probably going to scale that down when they are later in their 75, 80 years old. It may not be true for the early retirees who retire at age 28 with $500,000 in the stock portfolio. For them, it might go the other way around. They might spend more as they age. But I'm talking about...
Wait a minute. Hold on. I got to stop there for a second. Are you implying, Karsten, that a 28-year-old with $500,000 who promises you they're happy sleeping in a tent in the woods for the rest of their life might change their mind later? Is that what you're inferring?
Right. I mean, maybe they will not sleep in the tent anymore when they're 67. So I'm walking out on a limb here.
Eating a steady diet of government cheese and living in a van down by the river.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it had to be said, Frank.
So... you customize your withdrawals and you factor in some of these personal parameters, boom, your withdrawal rate might go up quite substantially. You might go from maybe the mid 3s to the mid 4s. And then the other way you want to customize your retirement is looking at market conditions, right? You have a very different safe withdrawal rate if the CAPE ratio is at 30 versus at 12. Equity valuations matter. The probability of a big market blow up is a lot worse in today's CAPE environment than if the market has already fallen and the CAPE is in the single digits.
Okay, hold on a second, Mr. Jeske, because either A, I'm going to have to edit that out, which I'm not going to do. I'm saying this because for our stackers, all of a sudden you just said CAPE ratio like it's nothing. Just threw this out there. If your CAPE is this, what the hell does that mean? What are you talking about?
CAPE is the cyclically adjusted price earnings ratio. So it's a valuation measure. How many multiples of average past earnings is the S&P 500 trading at right now? So in the high CAPE ratio, say in the high 20s or 30s, seems expensive and has higher probability of a big recession and bear market around the corner.
This is a risk measure. This is a measure of risk in the market.
It's both. It's a risk and a valuation measure, right? So it's a risk measure in the sense that, so in some way, I mean, some of the calmest markets have been around the time when the CAPE was really high, but it's kind of the calm before the storm, obviously, right? So before every major market blow up, the Great Depression, the CAPE was, I think, at just about 30. Right before the dot-com bust, it was about 40. And right now, I think the original Shiller CAPE is somewhere in the mid-30s. I have a blog post where I do a few adjustments to make it more comparable across time. But it's still historically in some of the highest percentiles of historical valuation observations. So, and again, I'm not predicting that the market will blow up tomorrow. What people will tell you, and I have worked when I worked in the industry, these valuation measures are terrible at timing stock versus bond allocation, say over the next quarter or year. But they are actually extremely highly correlated with equity returns, say over the next 10 years. And well, 10 years, that's exactly this danger zone. If you have a bad bear market during the first 10 years right out of the gates in retirement, that's what's called sequence of return risk. So that's exactly the time frame where you want to be careful early in retirement.
Let me see if I can put my arms around. Oh, hold on, Karsten. Let me see if I can put my arms around what you just said. High CAPE ratio means we probably should expect a lower rate of return from our portfolio over the next several years. And we can't predict that today. We can't predict that tomorrow. But using a more conservative number is going to be a better idea because of some sort of reversion to the mean, right?
Right. Exactly.
Gotcha.
You know, a few thoughts crossed my mind while you were saying that. One was, it bears emphasizing that that ratio is referring to the S&P. So if you have a globally diversified portfolio, that rationale may not apply to you as much as if you truly just owned the S&P. And so there are many other sectors in the market that have different valuations, much lower valuations in the S&P right now. Doesn't guarantee us anything, but it just, I see the media and sometimes us as professionals talk so much about the S&P, and that's 500 stocks, and a globally diversified portfolio with a few broad index funds could have exposure to 13 or 14,000 stocks across the US. So,
but it's highly correlated,
to keep that
right? It's highly correlated. So when I worked in the industry, for us, the US market was the S&P 500, because you have S&P 500, you have the most liquid market in options, in futures. And I can see that people would complete the portfolio with basically the Russell 2000 and have some additional mid-cap and small-cap stocks. And then on top of that, just because you have lower multiples in other countries doesn't mean that they are particularly safe, right? I mean, if we go through another bear market in the US, our CAPE goes from 30 to 15, and the European CAPE goes from 20 to 10, right? So it's not like the European CAPEs that are 20 right now, that they are so much safer than our domestic CAPE. So I see that, yeah, I mean, obviously there is, and by the way, the best time to diversify internationally was yesterday, was actually end of the year, last year, right? Because there was a pretty nice recovery of some of the underperformance in international. So German stocks, I'm from Germany originally. I'm very happy that German stocks made up a little bit of that lost ground. But I mean, you look at some of the GDP numbers from our neighbors and from other large, even developed countries. I mean, they haven't grown. I mean, Germany has hardly grown since 2017.
Sure. Well, you look at that long stretch, right? The long stretch where Japan didn't grow. I mean, every country has their own issues. It's so funny, Karsten. You always give me so much to grab onto, because there are times, and Karsten knows this because we fight at conferences, like there were 30 things in there that I just want to wring your neck, my friend.
Joe,
I just absolutely love it. Hold on just a second, Frank.
Sure.
But the thing that's interesting, though, to me, is what you said about the beginning of the year. I mean, this case that Dana, that you're talking about diversification, I remember at the beginning of the year in all of these online forums, people saying, should I dump all my international stocks? Which is maybe the perfect reason to load up on international stocks, is because everybody else is talking about dumping them. And so we did a show back in January about the whole case for international, and then one again 2 weeks ago about how to build that in for all the people that might have done that. Frank?
Yeah, just a few thoughts. I agree with Dana that to the extent this is a problem, it is best addressed by diversifying the portfolio better. If you do a very simple thing, which is split your stock allocations into growth and value, whether they're domestic or international, that itself will have a profound effect on making your retirement portfolio better. Because what you see is in years like 2022, when the growth stocks were down over 30%, you had the value stocks, some were down 10%, some were up 10%. If you have an allocation like that, that is really well diversified, what you end up doing then is selling the thing that does better, buying more of the thing that did low when you rebalance the portfolio, and you get a rebalancing bonus out of it. And that has been especially true in the last really bad period that we have in our lifetime is retiring at the end of 1999. And the problem there was that you saw market goes down for 3 years straight. But if you held value stocks in that, there were years that it went up, that it really solved this problem. And if you hold that kind of an allocation, your CAPE ratio, your ratio in your portfolio is going to be lower. It's just a more stable SUV-like allocation to it.
Again, more reason to apply little signs to this versus just hit it head on.
That's why you don't want to just be holding the S&P 500 as your allocation.
But the S&P 500 has growth and value. And it has it in half shares.
Well, hold on, guys. We'll get into your ideas for portfolios here in just a second, because I do want to.
I did have one other follow-up on that, which is the idea that you can use the CAPE ratio to predict things has been a big failure for the past 15 years. It really has been a huge failure. And everybody that's tried it, whether it's Vanguard or Karsten or any... or GMO.
I've shown... No, see, you can't just pick one single date. There's a whole cluster of dots in a scatter plot, right?
Yeah, and actually, I know what it looks like,
you pick is 2011, and in 2011...
You predicted 10 years ago that this was going to be a bad period, and it was one of the best periods.
No, I didn't. No, first of all, 10 years ago, I wasn't...
Wait a minute. Hold on a second, Frank. Let's give Karsten a chance here. Hold on.
So 10 years ago, I wasn't blogging. And it goes back to exactly what I said. The CAPE ratio is a terrible variable for timing stocks versus bonds, or timing stocks for the next few years. But there has been a huge correlation between valuations and subsequent 10-year returns and valuations and subsequent 30-year retirements. And you can't just pin it with 150 years of data and then you just cherry pick a few dots here and there. So 2011 is the one dot that you brought up. And I think and because it must have been in a podcast in 2021. And 2011, the CAPE ratio wasn't particularly outrageous. And then on top of that, right, you picked the 2021, which was just the recovery out of the pandemic, right? If you had taken 2010 and the bottom of the pandemic, would have looked perfect again. So I think there's
let's get back on track because we are so far down the CAPE ratio rabbit hole, which is exactly what
you brought this up, Joe.
And then the amazing thing is this:
we can make the data say whatever we want.
The amazing thing is also the logical inconsistency that Frank, who says that there is mean reversion between value stocks and growth stocks, right? Value stocks do better than growth stocks, but there's no mean reversion for the index as a whole.
I think the point there,
and then we're going to diversification, a lack of correlation. It's not mean reversion.
You want a dissension, Joe.
I know. I told you guys I was going to bring a group of people who felt passionately about this, and that's exactly what we have. We're going to talk in the second half about how to set up the portfolio and your different feelings about how to set up the portfolio, because I got one other thing here. We've been talking about the safe withdrawal rate and the amount that we take out of a portfolio. And the assumption here, especially when people begin, is that this is going to be a set, steady thing. And yet we know, Dana, that life is lumpy. like you're going to have these years when maybe you want to take the trip. Maybe you want to be Karsten Jeske and go on 3 vacations in the same summer, or maybe you're going to buy the RV or the second home or whatever it is. How do you factor, Dana, this lumpiness into your withdrawal rate?
Yeah, I think it's not only lumpiness that has to be factored in, but it's also time. And so, if we start with lumpiness in the go-go years of retirement, spending often is lumpy. Matter of fact, I just heard a term in JP Morgan's, annual retirement report
Oh,
called
sure. Yeah.
spending volatility. And I hadn't actually heard that before, but they talked about the amount of spending volatility that they see in the data in someone's early retirement. And it's true. You have these big lump sums that occur. People sometimes move, they buy new houses, they decide they want to gift their child or grandchild money, they decide they want to take up an RV or Winnebago or a new hobby, all kinds of things that maybe they didn't have time to think about before retirement. Maybe it's the big remodel they've been putting off, or, building that new patio or porch. So spending volatility is real. We account for it by using what I call the lifetime 4% rule. So we're projecting somebody's withdrawals over their projected longevity and taking the present value of those withdrawals and creating a ratio. And I call it the lifetime 4% rule because if I drop in an auto purchase or a down payment on a new home or funding the, a new wedding for my son or daughter, some of these big lumpy expenses that we see routinely, I can drop those in and see, does it change the lifetime ratio to a degree that I would be worried about the plan? And most of the time, the answer is no. Now, there are times where if I had these lumpy expenses and I dropped in, too many of them and too frequently, that lifetime ratio would go down to a level where I said, you know what? The 80-year-old you might be in trouble if you do all of this early in retirement. So I like that stepping back 30,000 foot view of some metric that encompasses these withdrawals over your lifetime, not just on a year by year basis. But the other factor that I often see missing is time. We think in 2 dimensions of withdrawal rate and ending portfolio value. But what if I'm 75 today? What if I had an 84-year-old who recently passed away, and for the last 5 years, her number one question to me was, tell me, Dana, how much can I give away this year? That's what she wanted to do, to grandkids, to charitable endeavors that she was interested in. And so it was always, well, how much can I give away while preserving enough that if I need assisted living or long-term care, I can still cover those costs. And so her withdrawal rate was much higher than 4% because we had time as a factor and there was a shorter time horizon.
If somebody knows that 10 years from now, I have this one big expense and I know I'm going to do it, do you just not even factor that in and put it in its own bucket, its own spot, and then not even include that?
We actually do factor it in. We use it in our model. We have a column we call lumpy.
That's a technical term.
It is. And the reason we put it there, I'm probably turning bright red. And so, but the reason we put it there is because we want to be able to calculate the monthly spending that we all use to budget on. And then we want to be able to separate out those lumpy expenses because we put them in there, but they don't always occur in the year where we put them, right? We build in auto purchases, but a lot of times people, I'm not ready to buy a new car yet, or I'm going to do it a year earlier. Or they might say, I have 3 sons and I want to contribute to their weddings. And, I'm going to drop in these expenses every other year, but they get there and no, none of them are getting married yet. And so
I don't like who they're marrying. They're not getting married.
That's right. I'm just cutting them out.
But that's what we call it, the lumpy column.
Mm-hmm. But I like that because I don't know, when I was a planner, if you use terms like lumpy, they get it.
Yeah.
It's when we use the highbrow terms that people don't understand what the hell that we're talking about.
Yeah, there is some interesting data on this, but it is so personalized that that's why you need to do a plan. But if you look at the general population, and the last research from the RAND Corporation shows that the average retiree is not increasing their spending at the rate of inflation. It's between CPI -1 and CPI -2. And that's an average. So half the people are spending even less. And half the people are spending more, and it seems invariant over even economic, how much money you have.
Which means it's very much going to be based on you.
It is.
Saying.
So, for instance, our experience in the past 5 years is we're spending less nominally than we did at the beginning, mostly because of these pesky kids are gone and making their own money.
See, I'm afraid of the opposite. At least for a certain time, I think the older my daughter gets, the more expensive she will be.
That's true. Your expenses will typically
So
peak.
in terms of college, marriage, helping with down payment, that's definitely on my radar screen. And I agree. So I think what really matters is as long as you get the average spending right, I think you should be safe. I once did some simulations where I looked at somebody $1.5 million portfolio, $60,000 annual withdrawals. And then I looked at, well, what if this person flips a coin the first year and then that determines you spend $72,000 in the first year and then $48,000 in the second, and you keep alternating. And then $120,000 and $0, $120 and $0. So also average $60,000. How much of a difference would that make in your final balance? I mean, it's indistinguishable. The distribution looks the same. There might be a level of lumpiness where probably it might make a difference, or there might be a level of maybe also a correlation where and persistence where it might make a difference. But for example, if you spend twice of your budget for 8 years and then 0 for the next 8 years, and then these 8 years exactly coincide with a down market, that probably would make a difference. But I mean, as long as the fluctuations in my expenses are faster moving than the global economy and the market cycle and the business cycle, I think there's absolutely nothing to worry about, at least. So I have a blog post. It's called When to Worry, When to Wing It. I think it's part 47 of my series, if you want to check that out. Giving a plug 47. Here.
That is such a Karsten thing to say right there. Part 47 of 182.
He makes a good point, though, that
he does.
Typically your spending, for most people that I've known or seen, is it peaks when your children are in college. And so, Joe, you're right there.
No. My kids are 30. And I'll tell you, Frank, to your point, when my son was a senior in high school and we found out what the bill was going to be for room and board, especially the food at the University of Texas, I was so happy, Frank, to write that check because I knew the way my kid ate, and I was like, University of Texas is going to lose money with my kid.
Yeah, that circumstance too. That it's like, sure, you were costing money over there, but you weren't eating on the side of a house and home when you were here.
It is so wild because, and I would tell clients that sometimes, Dana, that a lot of that was cost transfer, right? I mean, they're saving all this money for college for their kids. And yet, the kids go to college and all of a sudden they have money in their checkbook they didn't expect. Do you see most of your retirees spend less money than they think they were going to, or more money than they thought they were going to?
I would say on average, I see people spend less than what we have projected in the plan.
Well, that's good. You're being conservative.
We are conservative, so we have factored in Medicare Part B premiums. We've factored in these lumpy expenses that they perhaps didn't put in their budget. I've heard people say, well, we just bought our last car, right before retirement. And I'm like, I don't think that's going to be your last one. And so I just did this, the last major home repair. It's like, I don't know that that's going to work that way. So we have factored in these things that people forget to factor in. To Karsten's point, our average, if you were to factor in an average, well, it's already including all of those things. So in general, people tend to spend, yes. Now I've had some surprises, people who didn't consider their hobbies. One gentleman comes to mind. He was into hunting and camping and fishing. And so immediately upon retirement, he wanted a new camper van and a new truck to pull the camper van and all his new gear. And it was a substantial lump sum that we hadn't factored in, and his portfolio was less than $1 million. And it impaired his fundedness for the remainder of his retirement. There was many years there where I was nervous. Other cases, people who move right upon retirement, I'm going to, buy this house now instead of that house. Often it's just the timing of those things. We have a certain portfolio structure where bonds are maturing for anticipated cash flows. So if they surprise us with a big lump sum expense when the market's down, now we are required to take that big lump sum out of equities. And so the timing of those surprise expenses are where I have seen things put someone in a less than desirable position.
Where the time horizon changes because of just life happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
And life changes. You don't retire and everything happens just according to the plan.
We look at it way too much like retirement's a finish line.
It's not.
In many ways, it's a starting line, right? For this whole new adventure that you're going on.
We'll be back with more of our special retirement portfolio planning episode in just a moment.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
You didn't start a business just to keep the lights on. You're here to sell more today than yesterday. You're here to win. Lucky for you, Shopify built the best converting checkout on the planet. Like the just one tapping, ridiculously fast acting, sky-high sales stacking, champion of checkouts. That's the good stuff right there. So if your business is in it to win it, win with Shopify. Start your free trial today at shopify.com/win.
Did you know Fast Growing Trees is America's largest and most trusted online nursery with thousands of trees and plants and over 2 million happy customers? Whether you're planting fruit trees, adding privacy, brightening things up with flowers, or bringing in houseplants, Fast Growing Trees has it all. Even better, they can help you find options that are right for your climate, your space, and lifestyle. Click Order Grow. Every plant arrives healthy with the Alive and Thrive guarantee straight to your door. So if you're ready to get planting, this is the moment. Right now, they have great deals on spring planting essentials, up to half off on select plants. And listeners to our show get 20% off their first purchase when using the code WWO at checkout. That's an additional 20% off. Better plants and better growing at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code WWO at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code WWO. Now's the perfect time to plant. Let's grow together. Use WWO to save today. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply. Go to growingfasttrees.com for details.
I wanted to start with a 4% rule and a little bit about safe withdrawal, because I truly, in this discussion, has made me believe it even more, that starting with how you want to spend money, I think, versus what can I safely spend. And don't get me wrong, I think calculating safe withdrawal rates really important, but I think it's thing number 2. I think we get, especially mega geeks in the community, get so obsessed with how much can I spend versus here's what'll make me happy. Can I afford to do that? Like if I start there and then go, okay, and plus I can do more, I can do whatever, like how safe is it for me to do that? I think is a much better, because I mean, what I'm hearing is we're all so much different. We're all across the board different. So even more of the SUV, I think, if we handle it that way, or the bigger paddle for the canoe, depending on which analogy we want to use.
Yeah, I want an outboard motor.
That's right. I want to get into some questions about portfolios, though, to drive this, guys, because we are starting to disagree on portfolios. I want to hear more of that disagreement. No, I'm kidding. What I really want to do, though, is I want to talk about these things because, Frank, we just started on really risk parity, and you were talking about the differences between if we just get a little bit more scientific about this asset class versus that asset class. You guys mentioned this idea of sequence of return risks, where if I retire and things go to hell right away, that is a big risk that the certified financial planning community has warned people about. You know, you retire on the wrong day. How does a risk parity portfolio handle that differently than the traditional person would handle it?
So yeah, let's talk about a period like, say you retired at the end of 1999. If you were holding a portfolio that was just like the S&P 500 and a bond fund, your portfolio would have been underwater, or at least for the next decade. It might have come out a little bit, but would have been underwater for the next decade. Right. A portfolio, a risk parity style portfolio with a much more diversified holding is going to only be down, say, 4 years max out of that. And it's going to be down a lot less. I mean, I can give you, all of this plays into what the safe withdrawal rate is. There's a relationship here that the reason you have a safe withdrawal rate that's a 4% for these 2 fund portfolios and not 5 is simply because of these worst case scenarios, because it's a worst case scenario. It happens to be in the late 60s for that, at least.
So these different portfolios fit different conditions better.
And I also, you mentioned sequence of return risk. I think we need to be, the audience, I really want them to understand what the real problem is here, because oftentimes I hear people say, well, I'll just have 2 or 3 years of cash, and that'll take care of my sequence of return risk in case the market goes down in the next 2 or 3 years. That's not the problem. Any portfolio is going to be fine if it's just like 1 year out of 3. The problem is these bad decades. So whatever the sequence of return risk you need to solve for is not 2 or 3 years, it's 10. It's a 10-year bad decade, either like the 70s, the 30s, or the early 2000s. And so if you are designing a portfolio, you at least have to deal with those 3 things. And if you've dealt with those 3 things, you probably dealt with 99% of what you're likely to see.
The big question, I think, Frank, on everybody's mind is, where am I taking money from? Let's say that I'm taking money out. In a risk parity portfolio, am I changing that all the time? Am I changing it up as I go? As I'm rebalancing, am I rebalancing now money out? So I'm rebalancing out to spend the thing that performed best over the last period?
Yeah, you're basically selling high and buying low. It's very simplistic management. It's very elegant, actually. So you can do it one of 2 ways, basically. You could every year say, okay, I think I'm going to spend this for the next year and add a little bit more onto it. At rebalancing time, carve that off. When you rebalance the portfolio to put it back to its original allocations, you're taking cash out of it at the same time, putting it in a pot, and then just spending that for the next year.
Out of there.
Or what we actually do is look at it every month and sell the high thing.
Yeah.
So right now we're selling lots of gold. I've been selling gold for the past year and a half because it keeps going up.
You're selling whatever the driver is in that condition, and then as the condition changes,
whatever's doing the best gets sold.
Gotcha.
Which contributes to the rebalancing of the portfolio, and then you have to do less rebalancing. The idea is to minimize the number of transactions, which also helps you on the tax side, and to not make this complicated, not have to have 15 different rules just to manage your portfolio. You've referred to this, I think, in your conversation with Paul. It's like, it's like this tree, and you go pick the money off it every month, and by selling whatever it is, and then you leave it alone. And you're not monkeying with it or trying to do strange things with it.
Well, you see people become, to your point, I mean, they become victims of their own complexity. The more complex it is, the more you're going to blow yourself up.
And I think this is important. The more complex something is to manage, the less likely a do-it-yourselfer in particular is going to handle it.
Agreed.
And that is the problem with some complicated things involving buckets or ladders or things like that. If you don't have an advisor that's helping you with that, chances are you are setting yourself up that you will have to make ad hoc decisions during the management of it. You have to have a plan that covers all eventualities or covers all possibilities in terms of how you're going to take money out of this.
That's where I get frustrated sometimes by the question. Like, I will answer the question for people over on Afford Anything, and I'm like, but there's no way that you actually are going to do this. This will fail. And people will look you in the eye and they'll assure you, no, that won't fail. And then 8 months from now, they're like, what kind of hell have I created for myself?
Yeah. So if you take this portfolio that's maybe a lot of do-it-yourself portfolios are just like the same pile of stocks I've always had and a big pile of cash, and they think that that's going to cover their sequence of return risk. There's a chance that cash could all run out. Then what do you do?
Then you sell when it's down.
The stock market was down for 3 years in a row. If you haven't thought through all of the possibilities and built that into your management plan, you're going to have problems. And the reason I manage our portfolio the way we do is because we want it to be a simple management. We just want to get in the Forerunner and drive it and press the 4-wheel drive button when we need it, or turn on the fog lights, and not have to be wondering, oh, this sports car is got to stop. I need a ladder. I need some buckets of sand. I need this other stuff. It can get really complicated once you try to fix a substandard portfolio or suboptimal portfolio by bringing in all of these extra, I call them buckets, ladders, flower pots, and hoses, and pie cakes and other, it's all kitchen and gardening implements. I always hear people talking about. It's like, let's just put those away. Stop. Just take all those away and get yourself a good portfolio and a plan you can manage, and do that, and not be fooling around with the.
We'll save that for another day, Frank, because I actually think that's a simpler way to go, as you know. But Dana, when you're setting up your portfolio for income, do you take it in a similar way that Frank does? And how does tax location play into this? My Roth, my pre-tax, and my brokerage stuff, how does that work itself out?
Well, it gets far more complicated, as Frank was saying. It's interesting because as I'm listening, I'm thinking, well, how often we all apply the same concept, but the answer we get to might be different. And so we use a concept on our portfolios called mini-max. It's what mix of assets created the best outcome in a worst case scenario. When you look historically at various asset classes and you look at the longer time frames, 7 to 15 year time frame, certain mixes of asset classes had a much lower drawdown than other mixes. And so a traditional portfolio that's goal is to maximize return for a given level of risk, measured typically by standard deviation, is going to have a very different asset mix than one that is looking at, if I have to draw money out over 10 years, well, which portfolio still gave me the most left at the end in a worst case 10-year period? And so we do that through an investment partner asset dedication. It's a firm out of San Francisco that builds these specific portfolios. But it's the same concept Frank's talking about.
It's exactly the same concept. It's a different solution to the same problem.
Different solution to the same problem. Now, we do love ladders and so buckets, whether you want to call them.
Well, you are actually an advisor who can handle the thing for the client. And so you're dealing with somebody that wants you to do that. And I'm talking to do-it-yourself investors that need something simple.
If I had all my money in an IRA or a Roth, the strategy you're talking about, Frank, sounds amazing, right? It's automatically rebalancing, perhaps on a monthly basis, and I don't have to worry about taxes within that. Fantastic. But we often have households that have 8 different accounts. They might have trusts, they each have an IRA, they have a Roth, they may have a 401k. Well, now we're trying to rebalance across this entire household, create the most tax efficient outcome in the process. And those taxes, when you're in retirement, suddenly impact all kinds of other things, like how much of your Social Security is taxed and your Medicare premiums. And we have Roth conversions to think about. So for us, being able to step back and look at the portfolio within context of the financial plan means, okay, we have to align each account to the cash flows that it needs. And so we will use income ladders within that, paired with this mini max portfolio, this equity portfolio that is designed to hold up best under a worst case scenario.
See, and that's interesting because I feel like I'm on one end and I feel like Frank's on the other end. When it comes to the ladder strategy, I feel like Dana's kind of in the middle. But what's funny about that is that I think if I'm pulling money from a different asset class every month, Frank, it's more confusing for a do-it-yourselfer than if I just have a simple, this is my short bucket, this is my mid bucket, this is my long bucket. And to your point, I think it's not as efficient. I think it's nowhere near as efficient as what you're doing. But I think if I take the average person, if I take my mom, for example, and I tell her to look at her portfolio once a month and pull the thing that's did the best, I just completely lost her. Like she is gone. She is bye-bye gone. So maybe for the person in our community who likes looking at it every month, it's way, way, way better. But for my mom, short bucket, mid bucket, long bucket is a strategy she's not going to blow up.
This is where you need to separate what is purely a financial tool from a psychological tool.
Exactly.
And that's really
100%.
What's going on here. And I think people get confused as to what is a psychological tool and think it's a financial tool. So they think that a bucket strategy is going to solve sequence of return risk. And it doesn't.
And it doesn't. Yes.
On the good chip lollipop, you just go and rearrange the lollipops. They're still going to taste the same. They're not.
Where does he come up with these? I have no idea where the hell he comes up with all these.
The nonsensical ravings of a lunatic mind.
I have 2 comments. So first of all, I'm not a huge fan of the bucket strategy either, especially not if it's marketed as something that can improve your results. Because my philosophy is that, we want to arrive at some kind of a strategic asset allocation, right? How much do you want to have as stocks, bonds versus cash? I look at what kind of portfolio would have been most robust among all the different things that the economy would have thrown at me. And I would start all of the bad recessions in the early 1900s, 1929, 1960s, 1970s, and 2000s. And something like maybe a 75-25 portfolio, 75% stocks, 25% bonds, or maybe you want to go super safe and do 60-40, would have done reasonably well. It wouldn't have done perfectly all the time, and you can come up with some strategies that would have done phenomenally well in the 70s and in the 2000s. But then these strategies also would have done very poorly in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. And as a risk parity is actually that one strategy that I don't particularly care about it. And risk parity had its heydays and golden years, if you think about it that way, in the 2000s. And then everybody was talking about it. I was working at BNY Mellon Asset Management at the time, and everybody was kind of intrigued by that idea. And we were never particularly intrigued because it was actually quite low tech. You go from the innovations of the 1960s of mean variance portfolio optimization, and then you throw out half of it, the mean part. And all is left is the variance, and then you work around with the variance. And then you got this super lucky run in the 2000s, right? Stocks recovered very nicely out of the dot-com. Bonds were on this multi-decade run. And then commodities also did phenomenally well, right? And then commodities, the last few years, commodities outside of gold, right? Gold is that one special asset that has these very nice correlations, both in demand side and supply side recessions. But commodities are a very low expected return asset, and they have very high volatility. And I mean, I look at some of these ETFs that are marketed to unsuspecting retail clients. I mean, for example, crude oil, right? If you look at the crude oil spot price, has been the same as 10 years ago. Crude oil cost $60 in 2015, and it costs $60 right now. And what was the annualized return of the USO ETF, which is the crude oil fund? It's minus 9%. Not overall, minus 9% annualized. So putting something into this overly hyped asset class called commodities.
I think you're just going to say this crap.
Crap, right? Everything that's marketed at retail
Which is probably
clients.
why I wouldn't ever hold something like that. So I don't know what.
Well, but you are holding it as part of the commodity index. And then on top of that.
No, you don't know what I hold.
And this is really the backward-looking bias. I am actually looking at your returns, and they're actually quite underwhelming over the last 5 years. So a lot of this hyped stuff of overpriced and ineffective products like managed futures, leveraged ETFs, commodity ETFs, these high dividend yield ETFs, right, where they kind of sneak in principal liquidation through covered call selling. So really a lot of garbage is sold at retail client, and then it's sold with this aura of exclusivity, right? Oh, this is something that only hedge funds know about, and only private wealth clients at Goldman Sachs have until now been in the loop on this. And I tell you a secret, and you can come along with me with risk parity and all of these exotic ETFs. So I personally don't believe in that. And just going back to your earlier point,
you're talking about two different things, though, because I don't do that.
I prefer simplicity.
I don't do that. So stop talking about things. It's like, if you're going to talk about it, let's talk about the 100-year data set, and I've given you this portfolio.
Let's not go there.
Okay.
Let's not go there at all. But what I am interested in, because we heard what Frank likes, we heard what Dana likes. Karsten, enough about what you don't like. You've thrown a lot of fireballs.
Right.
What do you actually like?
So what do I like? Simplicity. I like broad indexes. So something like anywhere between 60 and 70% equities, the rest in bonds. And again, in bonds, don't get carried away. 40% government bonds is too boring. Now I'm going to throw in high yield bonds or preferred shares or something like that, right? That becomes much more risky, and you introduce a lot of equity beta through the back door. What I think is the most robust portfolio with simulations, something like a 30 to 50 year retirement horizon, maybe some modest final portfolio value at the end of the retirement horizon. So something like a 75% equities, 25% intermediate US government bonds seems to be the best performing. And sometimes you can come up with some special situation. If you believe that, for example, small cap value stocks are going to add 8% returns again, like they did in the 1920s and 30s, then you throw in small cap value. But I personally prefer that's
you fanboy up there.
The blog post I published in June.
I think Karsten's just here to just lob Molotov cocktails at everybody.
I just throw Molotov cocktails.
That's it.
Anyways,
you like to keep it
the
simple.
Simplicity. That's the easiest to sell. That's the easiest to manage. And by the way, I would do the same thing, right? You would rebalance occasionally. You don't have to do it every single month. how much of a difference does it make if we rebalance every month, every quarter, every half a year, every year? There's a final value distribution looks extremely similar depending, it doesn't really, as long as you rebalance at least occasionally, right? If you let it completely just run into infinity, that might create some problems in the long term. But as long as you occasionally rebalance, there's no harm by doing it more frequently or less frequently. So, I mean, it's exactly as Frank said. I mean, it's intuitive, right? I look at what looks like is a little bit, and you look at your fidelity statement, right? And it says, well, my target is 75%, and currently my equities are 75.6%. Well, then you take it out of equities and vice versa. So I think this rebalancing, you don't even have to do much rebalancing. Some of the rebalancing is simply done by taking it out of the pie slice that is the biggest at that time.
Well, that's what Frank was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Selling the thing that's doing well,
I wouldn't
that's driving
rebalance
it.
the whole portfolio every month.
Guys, I want to ask another question before we say goodbye, which is, Dana, as the CFP here, I want to ask you, and then gentlemen, feel free to chime in on this. We haven't talked about the things that a lot of the salespeople talk about when they talk about retire. We haven't talked about it at all, right? We haven't talked about annuities. We haven't talked about guaranteed income strategies. These are the things that people are being fed a diet of every day. Where does an annuity or some guaranteed income stream fit into the Dana Anspach strategy?
It's interesting because you make decisions for different reasons. And so when I think about Social Security as an example, in today's world, with all of the media saying it's going to run out and people wanting to claim earlier because of this, it is a decision you can make that hedges what we call longevity risk, the risk of living long, and it also provides inflation-adjusted income. And it's one of the only decisions you can make that really helps protect against that risk. So you need to look at that decision differently than anything else.
Look at your Social Security decision.
Yes. And the reason I bring that up in context of what you just said is because it is an annuity. That is what Social Security is.
And I was going to say, Dana, just before you move on, if you have a pension, then same thing, ditto.
In some cases, some pensions aren't inflation adjusted. Some are. Some pensions have some built-in factors where it benefits you to claim them later. And some don't. You should claim as early as possible. So you really have to look at that individually.
Another decision. Yeah.
Another decision. But it can hedge a different risk. And same with an annuity. So where I get frustrated is, annuities are framed as an investment alternative. And there are a ton of research out there that shows, if you add annuities to your portfolio, it can help prolong the length of your portfolio, actually help pass along more assets to heirs. And all of those things are true, but it's really a risk decision. And ultimately, if we have a truly horrible economic outcome, I wonder, how secure will those insurance company guarantees be? And so that has to be factored into that equation. But where I do think annuities come into play is behaviorally. When you look at David Blanchett's license to spend research, when people have guaranteed income, they are more comfortable spending and going out and doing some of the things that they want to do. So when we're factoring in annuities, one, we're looking at a set of metrics, something called coverage ratio, how much of someone's spending is covered by guaranteed income. But there's also a lot of behavioral decisions. I like framing things red, yellow, green. Like green, you got to do this. Red, don't do this. And so many of these nuances are yellow. Is having some of your money annuitized going to help you feel more comfortable spending? If you're someone that feels a lot of reluctance, are you going to be able to take that extra vacation or do some of those extra things? Then maybe it has a place in your portfolio.
I love that it comes down again to the behavior, because my biggest frustration with these deferred annuities, Dana, is not the fees, which can be egregious. And it's not the way that they're sold and marketed with all these bells and whistles. It's the fact that because they are last in, first out, every study I've seen shows people don't take the money out. They don't spend the money inside the annuity because they're afraid of the tax.
That's the horrible thing about variable annuities.
Yeah, it's way worse than the fees. You know what I mean? Like the fees are horrible. Like don't get into that. But the fact is, you're going to put the money in. You're never going to take it out.
I can't tell you how many clients we've had that purchase those elsewhere. And one of the first things we do is say, hey, you need to turn that income on now.
Good.
In many cases, the right decision is to turn the income on early and as soon as possible. Not in every case, but in a lot of cases, that is the right way to use the product.
Because
once
those
you
are even
already
more
own it.
horrific if you leave them to somebody else on the tax side.
Right.
It's
Oh,
horrible.
yeah. Then we got the bomb. Okay, there are so many things that people need to think about. I love the framework here that it clearly is not one size fits all. I mean, we have not talked about Medicare planning. We did not talk about required minimum distributions. We didn't talk about the fact that if you have a strategy that is defer, what that might do with Irma, this Aunt Irma that I don't even like. So frustrating.
That's a problem for you. You have too much money.
That truly is. Don't get me wrong. Irma, Frank, to your point, is a good problem to have, right? It is a good problem. Guess what? You're going to pay more tax because you have more money. But there are so many things, but I think we set up a good framework here. I want to ask all of you one more question, which is biggest misconception that you wish you could erase. Frank, let's start with you. People start to go into decumulation phase. What's the biggest misconception?
There's so many. I think what I see right now with do-it-yourself investors, their biggest misconception is the way to deal with all their problems is to have a big pile of cash. And that will solve their problems in some way, either whether they think they're sequence of return risks or some other thing. And that's really all they need to do is like, I'll just sell some of my stocks, have this big pile of cash that's, 3 or 5 years or something. And then I can just ride off into the sunset.
It's so funny how people think that that's the solution. It creates a whole nother slew of problems.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it today is because we've had such good stock markets for so long that a lot of the people retiring now have not experienced a multi-year downturn and how bad that can be, not only on the number side, but on the psychological side of it.
Yeah. Karsten, same question for you, but before you answer, there was something that we skipped over that I just want to make clear to everybody. When I said I like the bucket strategy, it has nothing to do with it being the most efficient. It has zero to do with that. In fact, I've said very publicly, it is nowhere near the most efficient. My fear with do-it-yourselfers is that you're going to blow yourself up. That is my biggest fear, is that I've seen so many plans that go sideways because, Frank, to your point, we just put all this, spaghetti into the plan, thinking it's better. And to your point, simplicity, I think, is the reason why I like that. But Karsten, same for you. What's biggest misconception besides now the one Frank mentioned, which is cash?
I think one misconception is that, again, it goes back to this bucket strategy, that people think that they can time the market, right? Because this is what a bucket strategy implicitly tries to do. Oh, I don't have to sell my equities if we go through a bear market. I liquidate my cash first and then my bonds. But that becomes now a timing problem, right? You have to time when to replenish the cash and bond bucket again. The average retail investor is horrible at timing the market, right? I mean, in some way, it's actually worse than just randomness, because randomness, at least you have a 50-50 chance. If you are getting your emotions involved and you're trying to rebalance and you lose your nerve when the market is, so it's basically you're selling low and buying high. Simplicity works best. And again, I don't fault the bucket strategy. I think it's a starting point. And if you arrive at the same asset allocation that seems pretty robust everywhere else, that's fine too. But don't expect any miracles. And in the best possible case, it's a kind of a crapshoot. And in the worst possible case, you actually lose money by overreacting and letting your emotions get in the way.
You bring up a great point, which is, the point that we didn't say, which is a point that I think we need to articulate, is that every strategy has an Achilles heel. There is and if you think your strategy doesn't have an Achilles heel, you haven't looked hard enough. Because I think the key is to not think I have the perfect strategy. It's to think I know what the Achilles heel is in my strategy. And I love how Karsten, I say the bucket strategy, and you immediately go, we got a time, which brings up, you don't do that. But that's a whole nother podcast. Dana, save us. What's yours?
I think we underestimate the cognitive changes that we might experience as we age. And I'm in the midst of writing a new book called Living Off Your Acorns. It's your guide to the 4 phases of retirement. So I'm talking about pre-go, and then go, go, slow go, and no go. And
Mm.
right now, I've been interviewing a lot of our clients in their late 80s around this slow go and no go phase. And I have seen cognitive changes occur as early as the late 60s, when someone's in their late 60s. And then if you read the Wall Street Journal and Warren Buffett announcing he's finally stepping down as CEO, he said, at 84, I'm finally feeling my age. We only hope that will be us, right?
Right.
If we're managing our own portfolio and if we have a spouse that's not financially sophisticated, right? What happens if those cognitive abilities change? And are we even going to recognize it? Because the part of the brain I've learned that causes those changes is the same part of the brain that generally governs our self-awareness. And so not only can we be experiencing these changes, we are not aware that our decision making, we don't see it. And so in a pitch for the financial advisory community, it's one of the reasons that in the decumulation phase, financial planners and advisors add so much value is you have that advocate with you through all of those phases. And if you're married, you have a spouse that has someone to turn to also.
You bring up a great point. I saw that in my clients, and it's difficult to bring up. I was very happy when I saw family members begin to come to the meeting with them.
Yes.
Which was great. And there were times when I would just suggest that. It wasn't my job to call a family member, but it was my job to say, you know what, why don't we have your daughter meet with us too? Have you ever thought about that? We'll do some intergenerational planning. Like how do you work around that, Dana? Because that's a tough conversation to tell your client that that it might be time.
Yeah, I mean, I've done the same, asked people to set up family meeting. In many cases, I've had people recognize it in themselves and let us know, hey, I've been diagnosed and we just want you to know so you can be aware of, if we request anything
That
odd.
is good. But in my experience, that was the exception. Somebody, because it also took some, I don't know if it's bravery or what, to say, I'm slipping.
Yeah, it did. It took a lot of bravery and it was relatively early in this person's early 70s. It wasn't where we might expect to see it. We're in a situation right now where we have specifically asked someone to find a power of attorney and have basically said, if you can't locate someone who can act in this capacity, we are going to need to terminate our relationship. We don't want to do that because I don't know what this person might do, but we've been getting conflicting instructions. And then, I changed my mind. And then, I'm suffering from this particular medical condition, which is the reason I'm acting like this. And we're like, well, what are we supposed to do? And so that's a case where, that's all we can do is just say, we really need you to find a power of attorney, and we can send them the Schwab form that enables them to talk to us and act on your behalf. And, if you can't do that, ultimately, we're in a pickle here, right? As a firm, what are we supposed to follow this person's request or not? And what's our liability?
Yeah, the liability thing I think would be real. I can see the family member later on saying, Dana, you should have seen this. You should have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugly. Thank you guys for this episode. This has been a fantastic discussion and truly proving that this is not a one size fits all problem. Let's talk about what you're doing in those amazing places you work. Let's go ladies first. Dana, what's going on at Sensible Money here at the end of June?
Well, I don't know that we have anything immediately upcoming, but we are doing our next webinar in August. It's on planning for healthcare in retirement. This might be our third or fourth annual webinar on this particular topic. It's on August 28th. You can find it on our website. If you scroll down, you'll see our upcoming free webinar and register for that. And also, I'm excited to announce I have started writing for Fritz Gilbert's blog, The Retirement Manifesto. My first joint post with him went out about 2 weeks ago, and my next solo post goes out, I think, in the upcoming weeks. And so it's super exciting. And I will be blogging about my own thoughts on retirement. I'm 54 this year. I want a very slow 16-year transition to retirement at 70 is what my plan is. But I had an experience on vacation last year that kind of brought it home for me of like, it was never, I'll never retire, to, oh my gosh, one day I actually will retire and I really need to think about what this looks like for me.
So we'll send people to the Retirement Manifesto as well. That is really cool, Dana. Congratulations.
I'm looking forward to it.
That's super fun. And when do we expect the book, by the way?
Hoping the book will be out in the fall. I'm doing this big hiking trip, and then I'll get the book wrapped up as soon as I return. And then it'll depend on, how quickly they can get it through editing and formatting and all of that.
It is sad you weren't walking today, but I totally understand it. Like, she's going to get all the walking she can do. Let's go to Karsten next, man. What's going on at Early Retirement Now, my friend?
Yeah, so I've slowed down my publishing after 62 parts of Save Withdrawal Rates. It's kind of, you have almost written about everything you needed to write about. Yeah, so I'm busy with my retired life here. So as we're recording this, my daughter is finishing up before her summer break. And then a few days after this goes live, I'm going to be on a roughly 2-month trip this summer. So multiple different locations, Alaska cruise, flying to Asia for a month about. And then taking another cruise from East Coast, from New York City via Nova Scotia, all the way to Iceland and back. So,
are you taking a vacation from your vacation?
We need a vacation after the vacation. So, but I mean, in some way, there's a life here so comfortable. It is a little bit like a vacation, like a retirement home here. So my wife and my daughter are very sweet, and so it's I'm kind of resting before this long trip. So and then after too,
resting by fighting with us. Nice job.
Right.
Yeah, and we will link to Early Retirement Now, because if you haven't been there, your stuff is evergreen. These are pieces that exactly. You can dive in. And
that's the intention too. Yeah.
Yes, and if you're a money nerd, you're going to find so much to love at Early Retirement Now, especially the part where he calls me a small cap fanboy. And now he's going to write about what a moron Joe is with buckets. Yes.
He awards you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Uncle Frank, glad we got in the same damn room together. Well, virtually at least, It's about time we had you over at Mom's basement. But what's going on at Risk Parity Radio?
Okay, as I mentioned before, we are on a fundraising campaign, a charitable campaign. So I'm very blessed by our listeners. I don't have a large audience, but they're wealthy and generous. And
they're passionate.
Yes. So one of our listeners has put up $15,000 for the Father McKenna Center, and we are to match. And so we've been, this just started last week. We've already got some good donations, but I'm hoping to get some more, and even from your audience. But what I really would like your audience to do is start following the Father McKenna Center on Instagram or on Facebook. It's spelled the Father, McKenna. It'll be the nicest thing you have in your Instagram feed, because what you will see is people helping other people, particularly high schoolers and college students. Once you see what we do there and how nice it is, and that's why my listeners like it. It's very efficient, and it's actually on the campus of a high school. We're the only high school in the country that has a soup kitchen and homeless shelter next to it.
That's fabulous. Where are you at, Frank? I don't even know where you are.
Washington, D.C. area. And the Father McKenna Center is on North Capitol Street. You can see the Capitol from there. It's also the closest homeless shelter from the Capitol. So I would invite your audience to follow that, and then also to donate to the Father McKenna Center. They go to their website, go to their donation page. When you fill it out, there's a little box there that you can dedicate it or something. And if you put Stacking Benjamins match or Risk Parity Radio match, it'll get counted for this matching campaign within the next month or so.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure we note that also on the show notes at stackingbenjamins.com. That is so awesome. And it goes well for everybody that missed Wednesday's show. We had the creators of a great documentary called Join or Die about the fact that joining a club, you're 50% less likely to die this year than if you don't join. And yet we increasingly are isolated. The number one group that commits suicide is men over age 70. We tend to retire and isolate. So talked about that on Wednesday. If you missed that, go back and listen to that. And then today we play in the money. So great stuff. Guys, thank you so much for being with us. Stackers, thank you. And Doug, you got it from here, man. What should we have learned today?
Well, Joe, here's what's stacked up on our to-do list for today. First, this won't come as a shock, but begin with the end in mind. When you know what type of spending you're looking at, you're more likely to avoid mistakes. Second, special products like annuities, while they may help people who aren't investment savvy, generally, the fees inside most annuities make them unattractive. However, if there's longevity in your family, an annuity can help you control the risk that you may outlive your funds. But the big lesson? Don't play games with Frank. That guy's a former lawyer, and the threats he can lay down, brutal. Hey, Frank, ease up on me, dude. We're just playing Go Fish. Chill. Thanks to Frank Vasquez for joining us. You'll find his podcast, Risk Parity Radio, wherever you're listening to us now. Thanks to Karsten Jeske for joining us. You'll find his work at earlyretirementnow.com. And, of course, thanks again to Dana Anspach for joining us. Dana can be reached at sensiblemoney.com. This show is the property of SB Podcasts, LLC, copyright 2025, and is created by Joe Saul-Sehy. Joe gets help from a few of our neighborhood friends. You'll find out about our awesome team at stackingbenjamins.com, along with the show notes and how you can find us on YouTube and all the usual social media spots. Come say hello. Oh yeah, and before I go, not only should you not take advice from these nerds, don't take advice from people you don't know. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any financial decisions, speak with a real financial advisor. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and we'll see you next time back here at the Stacking Benjamins Show.